Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the True North Report, news that every Canadian needs to know. So, we got a big show today. There's a lot to talk about since it's been a couple weeks or so since the last time we were here talking about the news. So, we're going to jump right into it. And the big story of the day is China bans Trudeau. As we look here to a statement made by the Foreign Affairs Minister of China, it ends up saying, "We banned him. We just banned the idiot. Yes, that's what we call him now since Little Potato was too kind. His dumbness seemed to be contagious in Canada, and we cannot allow that to happen here. Also, he brings nothing to the table except stuttering quips about our ties and comments on the Jello. Did you know that we have to have pictures in the synopsis of trade deals now so he can follow along during negotiation? Or that he travels with third grade school teachers that help him sound out big words in our G20 discussions, but no more. Now that he is banned, we will not have the pander to the lowest denominator any longer, and the adults can get back to business." Now, this is a joke. This is from 2pnews.com, and 2P News is a satire news source. But I thought that was a good way to start off the show because that is about the exact definition of the Prime Minister right now and probably the way that a lot of world leaders feel about him. It's quite clear that Trump feels this way about him. Recently, Trump has been going around on state trips to different countries, and he has not made a state trip to Canada yet. It's been 3 years almost since Trump was elected, so that's kind of saying a lot. He only seems to come to Canada and talk to Canadians and talk to Justin Trudeau whenever he absolutely needs to, such as what ended up happening with the I believe it was the G7 this year over in Quebec. But other than that, they want nothing to do with us. So, as everyone probably knows by now, the Vice Admiral Mark Norman ended up having his case thrown out of court, and after more than a year of him being thrown through the ringer, he had all charges dropped against him, and this is good for the Vice Admiral. He did nothing wrong. In fact, we just found out recently that Mark Norman was actually given permission by the Harper government to discuss the details of this case, but it was exactly what Trudeau was trying him on, and the cases ended up getting dropped because it was clear that there was more political manipulation, just like we were seeing in the SNC-Lavalin case. There was political manipulation by the Trudeau government as they were trying to intervene and get the prosecution to bring charges against Mark Norman. And they've been doing everything they can to not provide the appropriate evidence to the defense. This has been from the Department of National Defense. This has been from the government themselves. They were hiding documents on him. They were redacting documents. This is exactly the type of manipulation we've come to know from Justin Trudeau. But then there's something interesting just happened over the last few days. It appears that General Jonathan H. Vance, who is the head of our military, he has just received a pay raise. Now, General Vance was the one who dismissed Mark Norman from his position. Mark Norman was the second highest in command of the Canadian military, but he ended up getting dismissed from his position by General Vance, and many see this as the general being a good soldier who fell on his sword, jumped on the grenade for his commanding officer, Justin Trudeau, and it has paid off for him. He has just received a salary increase. His salary has now been increased from the range of $260,600 to $306,500. His former salary was $247,900 to $291,600. Now, the thing is this new pay increase will apply to all the work he's done from April 1st, 2018. And this is right around the point when Mark Norman ended up getting suspended from his position and then eventually was thrown out of his position. We also know that Mark Norman's not getting that back. He's not going to be put back in place for his position, and Justin Trudeau has not apologized for this. There was a motion that was put through the House of Commons in order to apologize for Mark Norman for what he went through, and this was universally voted on by universally accepted by every single MP in there, that Doesn't matter on party. The Conservatives, the NDP, the Greens, the Liberals, but Justin Trudeau left the Parliament, left the House of Commons before the vote ended up happening. So he was the only person in Parliament that did not vote to apologize to Mark Norman. Of course, he comes out just today, I believe it is, the 23rd of May, in order to apologize about a native chief who was wrongfully convicted back to before the 20th century or something like that. I didn't really look too much into the story. So he won't apologize to the man he screwed over, but he'll apologize for something that happened more than 100 years ago. This is the leader of our nation right now, and it is an absolute disgrace. It is unbelievable that this is what the Prime Minister is doing. But we've also seen what's ended up happening to Justin Trudeau. Ever since the Lav scam ended up coming out, what ended up happening with SNC-Lavalin and what he did to Jody Wilson-Raybould. But this, on top of it, was just as bad, if not worse. In fact, I believe it was Robert Fife was the name of the Globe and Mail reporter who ended up breaking the SNC-Lavalin story. And when he was on a panel on, I believe it was CTV News a couple months ago, discussing what was going on with Jody Wilson-Raybould, he actually brought up and said that what is happening with Mark Norman is a bigger scandal than the SNC-Lavalin affair. And the SNC-Lavalin was him intervening in a court case for an engineering firm that he has close connections to. So he was going to try and have all charges dropped. In this case, he was intervening in a court case in order to try and have an innocent man prosecuted. Justin Trudeau was extremely pissed off when the leak of what ended up happening with Mark Norman, when it came to the Irving shipyards and the Davis shipyards. He was so pissed off that he is actively searching out who was the real leak behind that, and they were going to blame it on Mark Norman. Of course, they clearly didn't believe that it was Mark Norman himself, because they've been investigating this for a long time now to figure out who was the leak. Now, Mark Norman could have been the quote-unquote leak, but he had permission to talk about it, so it's not a leak. Because this is one of the reasons that Mark Norman was not pleading guilty to what he did, because he didn't do anything illegal. But he has had his life thrown through the ringer because of it. It is disgusting, but Justin Trudeau is doing everything he can, or did everything he can, to try and convict this man. Now, the one thing that, between the SNC-Lavalin scandal and the Mark Norman case that really makes people concerned is the fact that we have a prime minister that's intervening in the judicial system. Now, the definition of a dictator or a totalitarian government is when the leader or the ruling government has control over the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, the three branches of government. Sometimes, just like in Canada, the executive branch and the legislative branch are mixed. This is what we have here. In the States, they keep the three tiers separated from each other. Now, in Canada, the executive branch is the Prime Minister and his cabinet. The legislative branch is Parliament. So that's every single MP that's involved. And then, of course, the judicial branch, everybody knows. So the Liberals and Justin Trudeau have control of the executive branch. They have majority government in the House of Commons, which means that they have the legislative branch, and now they're intervening in the judicial branch. So if ever there's been a time before where you can say that we have come close to a dictatorship, we're seeing it right now underneath the Trudeau government. But everything that's happened between Mark Norman and SNC-Lavalin has shown that his support is dropping, is in a free fall across the board, and this is amongst even average Canadians, people who aren't political junkies. So Trudeau has done damage to his image, and it's, in my personal opinion, if he got elected again in October 2019, he rigged the elections. He's already trying to do that through his Liberalist server. They say that the Liberalist server is data collection, so that way they can check up on each riding and see which riding they have is which riding is ones that they own, that they're definitely going to win, and then it works in tiers going all the way down to ridings that they won't win. So sort of where to focus their campaigning. Probably most likely they're going to focus in the swing ridings more than anything else. But the point is that this is a data collection server which collects all your personal information. It collects your age, it collects your family size, your religious beliefs, pretty much everything. So it's actually quite a concerning server. And to be fair, the liberals are not the only one. The conservatives also have a server very similar to this. I can't remember the name right now. I don't know about the NDP, but I assume that they do. So if Trudeau was to win the upcoming election, my personal opinion, he rigged the election in his favor. And now that more or less what has happened with Mark Norman is starting to pass, he is then reopening what is happening with building new ships. He is going to spend $15.7 billion on new Coast Guard ships. This was just released yesterday, the May 22nd. So it's going to be very interesting. But it seems to me that he is now following through with a plan that he wanted to begin with. In fact, Irving Shipyards is even one of the areas that are going to be building some of these ships. 2 ships, an Arctic Patrol ship that will be modified for the Canadian Coast Guard, will be built at Irving Shipyards in Nova Scotia. So it's going to be interesting. Let's see, what else we got for you today? Right. So there's been a series of articles that have been coming out from media sources. This includes CBC, Global News, CTV. And it appears to me as if the $600 million that Trudeau has given out to the media is starting to do what it's supposed to do. It's campaigning for him. It's spreading certain types of information that are beneficial to him. So I've been noticing that this is exactly what's ended up happening. And I also noticed that this is what happened in the last election to a lesser degree, but we're seeing it a lot now. It's these articles that are coming out right before election time that are pretty much spreading this idea that Canada is a hateful, racist, bigoted place. This came out on May 21st from Global News. Nearly 50% of Canadians think racist thoughts are normal, according to an Ipsos poll. And then we also have this here, which came out the same day. 37% in Ipsos poll say immigration is a threat to white Canadians. What is the threat? Oh, of course, and it's written by a Muslim woman. Of course. So this is exactly what the money that they're giving out is meant to do. It's supposed to get the media on the side of Justin Trudeau, get him on his side, and push the information that he wants out and campaign for Justin Trudeau. The thing is Justin Trudeau he got into office not strictly on the idea that Canada is a bigoted, racist place, but this is what he has stayed in power on. This has been his go-to for a long time, that the Conservatives are racist, that they're a white nationalist party, which is what they've been pushing for a long freaking time. And this is because it keeps the average Canadian in his pocket. By pushing this idea, this sentiment that nearly 50% of Canadians are racist, there's this white nationalist alt-right problem here in Canada, which has even been said by Chrystia Freeland. She ended up going to the UN, where she said white nationalism and Islamophobia is the biggest threat to Canada and the Western nations. They need to do this because in the type of country that we live in, this is exactly what Canadians don't want to be seen as. In fact, a lot of Canadians have a very particular point of view about our American neighbors to the south, that they are extremely racist. I don't believe this at all. You will always have some racism in your country. But you put this image out there, and then Trudeau positions himself as he is the only party standing up against this great threat to Canada and all the minority people that are living in it. Yet for some reason, despite the fact Canada is so terribly racist, people are still flooding our borders to be here, in fact even crossing over illegally. So this is all campaigning that the media has been doing. It's actually it's actually a little unbelievable, but this is exactly what the sort of thing that that'll get Justin Trudeau reelected in the next election if his poll numbers don't keep dropping. But the other reason is too, I believe, that they're pushing out these articles is because this idea is not winning Trudeau any more friends right now. That he's used the race card so much that Canadians are seeing through his lies, his deceit, and what they're doing. So they're trying to strengthen this idea by saying, well, 50% of Canadians are racist. 37% believe that immigrants are a threat to white Canadians. Of course, they also say, what is the threat? Well, most of these quote-unquote 37% that believe it's a threat to white Canadians are probably thinking about the future and the demographic changes that are happening, is my guess. So it's all a campaign. The media has been bought off, and that's another thing that happens in a lot of totalitarian governments, dictatorships, is the fact that they buy off the news media and then they push the propaganda that they want. In fact, for those who know the stand-up comedian Bill Burr, he had a special years ago, I think in 2011, where he had a very interesting point of view when it comes to if he was a dictator. It was a great little bit, but he was talking about overpopulation, which Bill Burr does a lot, but he was also talking about a dictatorship, and if you had complete control of the country. And he said what he would do, again, Bill Burr's joke is that you buy off the news media, so that way you're only getting the information that you wanted. And then he would, a joke goes on to say how he would sink cruise ships in order to take care of the population, and then he would open jobs about creating cruise ships in order to create jobs. It's actually a pretty good joke, but he points out about how if you buy off the news media, then they only hear the information that they want, and the joke kind of says you buy off the media so they don't know that all these cruise ships are being sunk and all these people are deliberately being murdered, and that it's a whole scam and these jobs are being created to create cruise ships just so people can go on and be killed. But this idea is exactly what Trudeau is trying to do, and we're going to get into this in just a minute. But now he's trying to buy out, to censor the internet, so that way he controls all forms of information. He controls the radio, which that many people don't even listen to the radio anyway. He controls the TV and the corporate media, but that's a dying breed these days. So he's going to where people are getting most of their information online. Social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all the other ones out there. And now, in fact, as you can probably see, I've had it on the screen for the last few minutes, from Spencer Fernando, Trudeau government picks Unifor, who is actively campaigning against the Conservatives, to help choose who gets $660 million media bailout. Now, Unifor is the largest union for people in the media, journalists and the sort. But they have more than one occasion have proven that they are against the Conservatives. They have done this when the Maclean's magazine came out with the cover that had all the Conservative leaders such as Jason Kenney, Doug Ford, Andrew Scheer, and was called The Resistance, and it was the resistance against the carbon tax. The Unifor Union put out this picture here that you're about to see, The Resistance, welcome to Andrew Scheer's worst nightmare. So that literally is going against the Conservative Party, not to mention that, I can't remember the guy's name, but this guy standing right in the middle is the head of Unifor, and he ended up coming out and saying, on public television, Doug Ford, fuck you. So these are the people that Trudeau is putting in charge of giving them the money to. Now, do you think that money is going to go to the post-millennial? Do you think it's going to go to the rebel? In fact, I'm going to be surprised if even a small chunk of that is really given to National Post, since considering they're part of Post Media, and Post Media owns a lot of... The National Post is somewhat conservative. They got a fair amount of conservative... they got a fair amount of conservative contributors, but I wouldn't say they're exclusively a conservative news outlet. But something like the Toronto Sun is, and many of the Sun, the Ottawa Sun, and many of these other Sun newspapers all across the country. If Post media really received a fair amount chunk of this money, although it's quite possible because they actually are one of the largest news sources in all of the country. But if the Toronto Star, which is now a penny stock, you can look that up. They're not even worth $1 for one of their stock isn't even worth $1 anymore. So they're a penny stock. Their readership has been declining for a long time and receives heavy criticism, has the nickname the Toronto Red Star because they consider them communists. If they receive this bailout money, then that's just going to show that this whole thing is a scam. Of course it's a scam, but that'll be the definite. In fact, I would be shocked. I shouldn't say shocked. If CBC received this money, considering they already receive over $1 billion per year, that would be part of the con. But they are also people that have been consistently on Trudeau's side. You can find many journalists that have given many journalists that have taken pictures with Justin Trudeau, and like there was also that interview that happened just a few months ago between Rosemary Barton and Justin Trudeau. That was terrible, where she just softballed him the whole time, a one-on-one interview, and she's asking him what type of music he listens to, does he listen to podcasts, are there some days that he wishes he could just not go into work. Like, these are just god-awful questions, and this was going right in the middle of things such as NAFTA, but yet she softballed him. So this is exactly what public media gets. When you give money to the news, they're just going to be on your side because they want a chunk of that money. Alright, so moving on. We were talking just a minute ago about how he's trying to control social media. Well, this is exactly what he's done. He just came back a week and a half or so ago of the Christchurch call to action. So this was supposed to be about these governments coming together with social media giants and then regulating online content to avoid radicalization and the spread of extremism. Now, the funny thing is they make this they call it the Christchurch call to action. I believe it was actually started by New Zealand and their prime minister, whose name I can't remember. And they're talking about, Christchurch happened here, and don't forget that 2 years ago in Canada, there was a mosque shot up by Alexander Bissonnette. Well, have they already forgotten about over 200 people killed in Sri Lanka by Islamic extremism? There was no reference to that during the whole thing, but then Trudeau comes back, starts talking about a digital charter that's going to be implemented in Canada. He's going to implement a digital charter, and then he's also saying that social media companies that don't fall in line with this are going to be fined. They're going to get you in a lot of trouble if they don't get in line with this. So the charter itself is a case of if what the government tells you, it's the opposite. The opposite is true, because you just read through it and you know it's a pile of crap. So here it is right here. This is the charter, and it's got 10 principles of the charter, which includes universal access, safety and security. Canadians will be able to rely on the integrity, authenticity, and security of the services they use and should feel safe online. So they're talking about integrity, authenticity, security. So right there, they're controlling what you are going to be doing online and should feel safe online. That's the giveaway. It's not the government's job to make you feel quote-unquote safe online. It really isn't. In fact, their job is to make sure that you feel safe in person. If you're offended by something online, it doesn't fucking matter. But you look between the lines and you can see that this is exactly what they're doing. They're trying to regulate online content for what they're going to consider extremists and violence. We're going to see. Number 6, a level playing field. The government of Canada will ensure fair competition in the online marketplace to facilitate the growth of Canadian business and affirm Canada's leadership on digital and data innovation while protecting Canadian consumers from market abuses. So right there, you can already tell this sort of what's going to happen out of this. This is a form of communism in which they say we're going to ensure fair competition online. Competition is competition. There's not really much of an advantage one or the other. You succeed or you don't. Number 7, data and digital for good. The government of Canada will ensure that the ethical use of data to create value, promote openness, and improve the lives of people at home and around the world. So promote openness, but this exact number 7 what's the word I'm looking for? This exact idea of openness is then refuted in what's coming next. Free from hate and violent extremism, Canadians can expect the digital platform will not foster or disseminate hate, violent extremism, or criminal content. Now, criminal content is one thing. I can understand criminal content because there's already laws on the books, so you can't just go out and do something. You will be arrested in real life, and this has happened long before this digital charter. I think the perfect example of this was this one dumb bitch went to Facebook after she was involved in a robbery and flashed all the stacks and started talking about how she just committed a robbery. Police showed up at her door a few hours later and arrested her. There's already that protection that's on the line. But when they say disseminating hate and violent extremism, with the way that the world is going and what is considered violent hate and what's considered hate and violent extremism, the bar is being lowered so much, and this is also my problem when we go back to this over here, when we're talking about racist thoughts are normal in Canada for 50% of the population. My problem is that the bar is set so low that I don't trust what they considered hate and violent extremism. If you talk and have a problem about the doctrine of Islam, then most likely that's going to be considered hate, or even possibly violent extremism now these days. You'll be considered a white nationalist because of it. And then also, when we go back to number 7, it says data and digital for good, and it talks about promote openness. It then goes on to say in number 10, there will be a clear, meaningful penalties for violation of the laws and regulations that support these principles. So right there, you can't have openness and then have heavy regulations that are going to be, you're going to have heavy penalties against them. Let's see, and then down here, this is probably the part that bothered me, one of the parts that bothered me the most, is this part right here where they talk about intellectual property. Because I believe this is a precursor for our own version of Articles 11 and 13 that is seen in Europe. And those were putting heavy restrictions on what they considered intellectual property, to the point you couldn't share an article, you couldn't put out a meme that somebody else had without drastically altering it to make it your own, because it was considered intellectual property. And this is also was also part of the agreement in TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, I believe it was called, is the fact that there was a big part in it that was about intellectual property and about protecting it, but then this was also regulating a lot of what we share in a day. So Trudeau is using this to control all the information that you hear leading up to the 2019 election. Between the media and regulating social media, you won't be able to talk about the true problems that we're having, and you can guarantee that right-wing points of view are becoming more and more quote-unquote extremist, even though there's data out there to show that it is the left-wing parties that have moved steadily more and more to the left, become more and more radical, and it's actually the right wing and the conservatives that have stayed pretty damn centrist. So there is a big divide between the left and the right, but the big divide was created by the left, not by the right. So I don't like the way that we're going. We have the government that controls all three branches of our government, And now they're controlling all the information you get to hear. And on top of that, they're taking away the guns. They've already pushed out a bill that would that severely limited your access to firearms, and now they're proposing a handgun ban, as if like they're focusing on law-abiding citizens while letting the criminals get away, because it's not like they're going to do anything. They're to stop the criminals. They're also starting to institute gun buyback programs, so it's another way of disarming you. We even found out that a lot of Venezuelans are unhappy now that they gave up their firearms because of what has come into their country. So the whole thing is just leading us down a bad path, and we got to change now, or we are in for a very terrible future. And if that wasn't bad enough, Trudeau government may accept roughly 30 ISIS members back in Canada. According to a new report courtesy of Stuart Bell at Global News, Turkish officials have stated that Turkey is open to allowing detained Canadian ISIS fighters to be transited through their country to face prosecution in Canada. Moreover, Turkey is willing to cooperate with the RCMP in order to repatriate the dozens of Canadians caught by US-backed Kurdish forces during the collapse of ISIS. Now, do you really think that these people are going to face prosecution in Canada? Because we already have returned ISIS fighters, and they haven't faced prosecution here in Canada. In fact, there was even the New York Times, I believe it was, interviewed one of these ISIS fighters. He more or less gloated about it. Gloated about how he went off, did all these atrocities, committed genocide, committed mass rape. The Yazidi people were completely butchered over there. And then he came back to Canada and nothing happened about it. When places such as the US, the UK, France, and many other of our allied countries are taking away their citizenship, and some of them are even hunting them down, or at least letting them rot over where they are, we're taking them back. They are not going to be prosecuted. They're not going to face any consequences for what they do, and it's making our society less safe. Not to mention that the Americans right now are very suspicious of the Canadian northern border, because this is where a lot of extremists are sneaking into the US to commit terrorist attacks. This, in fact, just a week or two ago, I think it was last week, there was a father and son who ended up getting arrested because they were under investigation by American border security officials. They had to let Canada know, and then they got arrested with explosive materials in their home, and they get out on bail. Our whole system is just a joke lately. Nothing there for me. Here we go. So, right now, Bill 21, I believe it is being pushed through in Quebec, which is the secularism bill. Well, we've got a very stern warning from the UN human rights observers who warned Quebec about secularism bill. High-ranking human rights monitors with the United Nations are concerned the Quebec government will violate fundamental freedoms if it moves ahead with legislation to limit where religious symbols can be worn. 3 UN legal experts, known as rapporteurs, signed and sent a letter written in French last week to the Canadian mission in Geneva. They asked the diplomats to share that letter with Quebec legislature. The letter says the province's so-called secularism bill, which the Coalition Avenir Québec government is rushing to pass by next month, threaten freedoms protected by the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. Quote, "We are particularly concerned about consequences for those people susceptible to being disadvantaged or excluded from a job or public position because of the potential effect of the proposed law," the letter reads. And yeah, it's Bill 21. Well, Canada, first of all, is a secularist country. We have been for a very long time. So, we have a right to dictate what is acceptable in our country. But they're doing it because now there are people such as the Sikhs and the Muslims who are not going to be able to work in the public sector because of it. Well, tough titties. That's the way that this is working. Because they have every right to do that. They should have every right to do it. It's not saying that these people can't practice their religion. They're saying you've got to integrate in order to work in the public sector. That a teacher teaching a bunch of children shouldn't be covered up head to toe in a niqab. And if they don't like it, quite frankly, there are other countries that are willing to accommodate them, or even other provinces. But if Quebec wants to push this through, then Quebec has every right to push it through. But the fact that the Human Rights Council of the UN is trying to dictate to us about what is acceptable, what's not, is a fucking joke. Look at the members of the Human Rights Council right now. Afghanistan. China, who have their social points program, which limits travel and many other, access to social media, which is literally a suppression of their people, but apparently they're going to dictate to us. Egypt, Iraq, Nigeria, Pakistan, Qatar, where foreign workers there, are treated pretty much like slaves. The population is extremely rich. They're extremely rich for a tiny country. But they have actually been reports coming out, first of all, that they are funding terrorists and extremists all over the world to infiltrate different governments, Islamic extremists, but then about how foreign workers there are treated more or less like slaves. Rwanda, which even in my life, and I'm not that old, Rwanda, which had one of the worst genocides in recent history, are sitting on the Human Rights Tribunal. Saudi Arabia, enough said. South Africa, where right now white farmers are having their farms taken from them and are being attacked and having their whole families murdered. These are the people that are trying to say that our secularism bill could violate human rights. The biggest violators of human rights sit on the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. What a joke. Alright, next story. So, a couple things here. This is actually going to be pretty quickly. Is recently the Canadian government held a memorial for all of our fallen veterans that were killed in Afghanistan during the Afghanistan war, and they didn't invite any of the families to it. Oh, what was that I just saw? Oh, never mind. They didn't invite any of the families to the ceremony. As it says here, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Wednesday that he will get to the bottom of why families of soldiers who died in Afghanistan weren't included in last week's dedication to the Afghanistan Memorial in Ottawa. Many families were pissed about this. Of course they were. Their kids and their husbands and their fathers and going off to fight in a war half the world away were killed over there. You open up a memorial to it, and it was pretty much just open to the highest echelons of the government and the military. Trudeau was asked a question about this. Not one reporter points out, when he says he's going to get to the bottom of this, not one reporter points out that Harjit Sajjan was present right behind him. The Minister of National Defense is standing right behind him, who would have been involved in the creation of the Afghanistan Memorial. Not one reporter pointed out that he was standing behind Justin Trudeau and he could probably answer the question, or that he probably knew why. So that's really all I had to say on that, really. Now, this next thing is this has been consistently going around here in Canada. It was pretty much sparked by what ended up happening in Alabama, I think it was, where they ended up putting out legislation when it came to abortion. And that was when it came to abortion, in which I believe it stated that when there is a heartbeat, that you can no longer get an abortion. So many people were pissed about it, sparked another huge abortion debate in the US and in Canada. People are now making reference to Andrew Scheer, who said he's not going to open up debate again. In fact, if anything, he's going the opposite direction, and many other Conservative MPs, because they even opened up at the Conservative National Committee that they had in, I think it was Nova Scotia last summer. They even opened up the floor to ask people should they remove the idea of being pro-life as a conservative principle for their party. So they're even going the opposite direction, but they're trying to make it seem like abortion rights in Canada are under an extreme threat, and that it's a woman's right to choose, that whole spiel, you know. But anyway, this is only a 10-second video from our illegal immigrant minister, Maryam Monsef, who, yes, her mother lied on their application for asylum here in Canada when she was a kid. So it was one or the other. It was either she was born in, her mother said they were born in Iraq when they were really born in Iran, or mother said they were born in Iran when they were really born in Iraq. I really can't remember at the moment which way it goes. But she puts out this statement when it comes to Andrew Scheer and abortion, and this is what she had to say.
Canadian women and their allies are afraid, and they deserve to know that Mr. Scheer and the Conservative Party of Canada will see women's rights as human rights.
So they want the Conservatives to see human rights, women's rights as human rights. I don't think anybody is denying that. But the thing is this part of the argument where it's all about men controlling women's body. Oh, it's a woman's right, you know. They make it sound like it's literally gender versus gender on this, as if all men are pro-life and all women are pro-choice, when in fact, more or less regardless of your actual gender, it's more or less 50-50. Because, and I have the data to back that up. Here we go. This is from Gallup. And when was it put out? 2018 pro-choice versus pro-life 2018 demographic table. So we can see here, this is actually from the US, but considering how similar our cultures are in Canada, you can more or less guarantee that these numbers are exactly the same. Close, anyway. So, about 48 to 48% US adults when it comes to pro-choice and pro-life, with 5% saying no opinion. Now, down here, gender, men, pro-choice, 47%, pro-life, 49%. 3, no opinion. Women, pro-choice, 48%, pro-life, 47%, 4% saying no opinion. So there is the numbers right there showing that it is more or less a 50-50 split. Yet they make it sound like it's women under attack and all women agree, and this is just all men that are trying to take away women's rights. It depends on your point of view, because right now it's that people who are pro-choice see it, when you get pregnant, as a life, and they don't want you to end that life. They see it as murder. This is why they're so dedicated to everything that is going on when it comes to abortion. Now the thing is right now in Canada, they're making it sound like they're fear-mongering that women are just under attack with their abortion rights. There is no law surrounding abortion in Canada. There is zero laws. You can have like that New York law that was just passed a couple months ago that pretty much gave abortion right up to the point of dilation, has been around in Canada since 1988, ever since it was R.V. Morgentaler. Ever since then, which was in 1988, all laws of abortion in Canada were struck down. Women have all the abortion rights, yet they're still, like, not just them, the pro-choicers, sorry, I need to be more specific on that. The pro-choicers are still bitching and moaning and whining, saying that that people who are pro-life are trying to take away their rights, the rights of a woman to control her body. Well, what about the right of the child? That's someone else. That's another body out there. They want to make it sound like it's all their body. Well, what about the body of that child? That's all, not just your body. That's the fucking life of the child that is being decided right then and there. Yet they're not going to bring that up. They think it's just all a woman's right. And you know what? There is even something that has been going around on the internet. It's a statistic which I didn't actually pull up, but this statistic was showing how how when it comes to abortion, they went through the stats about how much is due to incest, how much is due to rape, how much is due to the physical health, the danger of physical health to the woman, how much is due to the psychological health to the woman and why they get abortions. 75% of them was elective. Now, they're trying to spin this because I even saw something today that was saying that, well, it's misleading because, you know, there's not any, it could be women who had an abortion but it didn't fall into that category. I think they more or less covered all the categories, or the majority of the categories. There's maybe just a few that would have picked elective, or because they didn't fall into a category. But I mean, we're talking about rape, incest, psychological health, physical health being dangerous, economic hardships, but it was elective. And this is the problem when it comes to abortion, especially that a lot of pro-lifers talk about, is the fact that the problem is that it's being used as a form of birth control lately. Right now, in Canada, there are 100,000 abortions committed every single year. There's between 300,000 and 400,000 births in Canada every year. Now, I think this is just an average, and I think also the abortions is just an average. But the point is, about a quarter of the population, from a third to a quarter, never gets born because of abortions. So the whole mantra was that abortion should be safe, legal, rare. Well, they're safe, they're legal, they most certainly are not rare. Not even friggin' close. And we also need to bring up that the woman who championed abortion and the freedom for a woman to have an abortion from the US was Margaret Sanger, who was a eugenicist, and she was actually extremely racist. She didn't want white women having abortion. She wanted black women to have abortion because she wanted them to do this so that way the black population would decrease. She was trying to literally kill off the black population through abortions. So let's not pretend like Margaret Sanger was some great hero to women, that she was doing it just because women should have that right. She was doing it because she believed that the population was too high and we should kill it off, and that the black population should be killed off. These are the hero to the feminists and the pro-choicers. But these days, you really can't bring that up, can you? I gotta admit, that's about all I had for you guys today. I had a bunch of stuff I wanted to run through since it had been so long since I had actually put out a video on my YouTube channel. This will also be available on the Facebook page, so feel free to stop by. It's True North Report News Network if you made it this far. And I've been slacking lately. I'm trying to update it every single day, at least put out a couple things. But I've been slacking for the last few days for sure, so I'm going to try and get back into that. Anyway, thank you for joining me on the True North Report, news that every Canadian needs to know.